As for the next video, it's not going to be a single show I'm talking about. Instead, I'm going to be discussing the integrity of Welsh dubs and how they help Welsh kids understand Welsh. Well, I'm planning to make a video where I talk about the history of Welsh dubs and how they help people learn the Welsh language. You thought I would forget about doing it, wouldn't you? Alright, so now that I'm finally back at making more videos on YouTube again, I'm gonna be telling you what I've been doing for the past 2 months. After binge watching long plays of the Legend of Spyro trilogy, I've done nothing but doing stuff on Office 365, making presentations and documents on things like Mario, Sonic and Thomas. Then, I thought of going into another video game series that I'm curious about, the Ori series. Yup, that's right. If you don't know already, the reason I decided to play the Ori duology is that the games looked so beautiful, and that I actually first heard the soundtrack as far back as in summer of 2020, when you all know how I felt back then. Of course, it wouldn't be until now that I played 2 of the Ori games on my Nintendo Switch, and I have to say, I liked them. I legitimately thought that while video games can be addictive to some, most of them have truly engaging stories and beautiful visuals, and that's what I want from them. But anyway, aside from that, this video is going to be about me talking about the history of Welsh dubs, and how they've helped children learn the Welsh language. And if you can't tell, I actually made one on Moviezilla while editing, with a script fully written, lines recorded on Audacity, and that I downloaded some images and videos from the internet. But unfortunately, due to Moviezilla not having enough space or something, it crashed. I forgot to save it, making it lose my progress. I was about to start all over again until I decided to just give up. But now that I've gone back to making what I once planned, I'm going to be rewriting the script I made, cause one, me talking about the time when S4C was launched was sort of a bit too in detail, as it had nothing to do with Welsh dubs, or dubbing in general, and 2, I hadn't given my thoughts on these dubs, as the only Welsh dub I focused was Thomas, and I just never cared for the others. So, without further ado, here's my revised version of a video I lost in the progress. When it comes to translations, it's easy to take an existing book, TV show, movie, or video game from their original language and change them into their own. Some of them can pull off pretty well, whilst others, not so much. But the one thing that's uncommon to most people is the Welsh language, and the shows that have been dubbed into said language. Media in Wales has usually been common back in the early years, when people had literature to read and the radio to listen. Welsh television, however, was another story. Being first launched in 1964, BBC Cymru Wales provided a TV service for the people in Wales, with it only airing the news. It, however, had one significant problem. None of the shows on the channel were Welsh speaking. Trials and protests occurred until on the 1st of November of 1982, Sianel 4 Cymru, short for S4C, was launched, finally giving Welsh people the channel they want. S4C is known to be the first and only channel to have shows entirely spoken in Welsh. Some of the shows that they first air range from children's, soap operas, news and sports. Most of the shows on the channel were quite original at the time, but that did not stop them from importing shows and movies from Britain and everywhere else to be translated. Prior to S4C's launch, HTV Wales actually did dubs of movies translated to Welsh during the 1970s. They were the very first examples of Welsh dubs at the time, but weren't as popular as they are nowadays. S4C, on the other hand, went all out with their shows on the channel. One of their blocks, Club S4C, a morning slot that was aimed towards children, only had created shows of their own. As they've already got shows like Sam Tan, Super Ted, Will Quack Quack and Sir Winf a Plumsan on the block, the people decided that there should be a new show to fit in the slot, and they knew who it was gonna be.
Injan Dank ydi Thomas, ac mae o'n byw mewn gorsaf awr ar Ynys Sodor. Un bach siriol di Thomas, chweolwyn bach prysur, corn bach swnllyd, bwylar bach tew, a bol bach crwn.
In 1986, just 2 years after it was aired in the UK, Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends saw its debut on the Welsh channel being renamed to Thomas y Tankau Ffrindiau. Taking the same year as the second series started airing on CITV, this dub of Thomas saw some changes, including how the characters have been pronounced in the same way in English, with the exception of a fat controller, who is called the rewrote in Welsh, the signs being renamed to Welsh, which they later do in the following seasons, and that John Ogwen, best known for starring in 1978's Hawkmoor and the Doctor Who serial, Revelation of the Daleks, played the role of a narrator, which he would remain up until the CGI switch, where he narrated episodes from the 13th and 14th seasons, as it just kept on getting reruns and not dubbed the rest of the seasons after those 2 seasons. Likewise, Ogwen's narration is for the most part decent. He sounds like he's trying to replicate Ringo's narration, but in a way that pleases Welsh audiences. The show would later have more of its seasons dubbed into Welsh up until during the 7th season, when during that time, Thomas had just been soft rebooted by Hit Entertainment, and that the people at S4C and Sign Records didn't have time to dub any of those seasons in that era, as they thought it didn't feel or look like the Thomas they know, or something, but that's just my guess. The Welsh dub of Thomas soon became one of S4C's most popular children's shows, next to the likes of Sam Tan, Super Ted, Kathy Sally Mally and Will Quack Quack, as it spawned home video releases and translated some of the books, including the Railway series written by the Reverend W. Awdry. And speaking of the CGI series, since the series has now been switched to being computer animated, the series saw the characters now being voiced by different actors, as this wasn't the first time that happened. And is it good by any means? The voice actors are doing what they can, unless if they're paid for doing this. But it won't save them from the constant rhyming.
Nôl llyfrau'r plant sy'r gwaith gorau yn y byd, rhaid hwffio a pwffio I gyrraedd mewn pryd.
It sounds even worse in Welsh. And despite the atrocious era that is the Miller season still continuing to have reruns after 10 years and not giving new material, it'll be likely if Sign Records will just look at the state the Thomas franchise is in right now. Or maybe they just don't care. Following after Thomas is Spot the Dog, another famous British children's book series that got popular in Wales. Immediately after the success of the animated series that is The Adventures of Spot, the people at Sign decided that Spot himself would get a Welsh dub. And so, in 1990, the series has been renamed to Anturiaethau Motaki in Welsh. Unfortunately, none of the episodes have been surfaced online, despite it having several home video releases, which are quite rare to say the least. But from what we can tell, Sue Hughes provided the narration for the episodes. There was also a Welsh dub for Spot's other show, Spot's Musical Adventures, which again never surfaced online, with it only having 2 VHS releases. Soon after, S4C aired more shows and films that have been translated to Welsh, most notably Asterix, Postman Pat and Noddy's Toyland Adventures. With Asterix, nothing is said apart some of the animated films being dubbed, with Dove and Roberts being one of the voices, and much like Spot, none of them ever surfaced online except for sources that was found online. Luckily, the last 2 shows have been surfaced online, thanks to Luke Bro uploading the episodes on his YouTube channel. Postman Pat, which the name remained the same as English, had only 3 of the Welsh dubbed episodes found, as it has other episodes released on home video that have not surfaced yet. Kevin Roberts played the role of narrator and soon afterwards was just left out completely. With Postman Pat still running on CBeebies with newer seasons, neither of the people at S4C were aware that the show is still airing and are just likely busy with their own shows. Noddy, on the other hand, was another story. The protagonist was spelt as Noddy, just with the last 3 letters changed, and rather than having 2 voice actors like the English version, the Welsh dub took advantage by having 4, as it felt easier getting more than 2 people to voice characters. Much like Thomas, the Noddy series became one of S4C's popular children's series that the show's post-Toyland adventures got Welsh dubs. Make Way for Noddy became Planet Plant Bach's most viewed kids shows on the block. 2009's Noddy in Toyland had one as well, but the ever so infamous reboot that is Noddy Toyland Detective never had one. I'm proud. There's also the opposite, where shows from Wales also get translated into English, with shows like Sam Tan, Super Ted, Will Quack Quack, Joshua Jones, etc. They have been transmitted over to British television and aired on the BBC and ITV on their morning blocks. Some of these shows had to be renamed to fit to an English-speaking audience, like for an example, Sam Tan was renamed to Fireman Sam, and Will Quack Quack was spelled differently, despite the title sounding similar. Voices also had to be dubbed for English people, so that they can understand what they're saying. Fireman Sam, now in English, had all of its characters voiced by John Alderton, an actor who's known for starring in shows on ITV. The cast of Super Ted has been changed drastically, with the main character being voiced by Derek Griffiths and his sidekick Spotty voiced by John Pertwee, who you already know him as the Third Doctor and Wurzel Gummidge, while Will Quack Quack retained its narrator, Myfanwy Talog, speaking in English while still keeping her Welsh accent. And whilst there are things like that nowadays with Welsh shows being dubbed to English, I find it hard to believe that S4C is insisting that their shows should be kept in Welsh, as most of them are in live action and they barely make any cartoons. Now of course, as the years went on, more cartoons and especially live action shows aimed towards younger kids have been getting dubbed into Welsh. So much so that shows on Planet Plant, a blog aimed towards older children, have shows translated to Welsh too. Nowadays, we have modern shows getting Welsh dubs, mostly on blogs aimed towards children. SpongeBob, Paw Patrol, Miraculous Ladybug, Peppa Pig, and Peter Rabbit are all prime examples when you think of kids shows in modern years. But what's sad is that neither S4C or Sign Records have any plans to look back on past shows and see what obscure shows they aired, especially Welsh dubbed ones. What I'm saying is that there are a lot of shows, specifically kid shows, that have never received any home video releases, especially those that aired during the 90s or 2000s. The most missing ones that are impossible to find are the Mr. Men and Dennis and Nasha cartoons from the 90s, both of which have received Welsh dubs that cannot be found anywhere, especially if they've been recorded on tapes. It might be possible that they are somewhere in the vaults of the S4C archives and no one has brought them, but it'll take a lot of time if they're found. But just a quick update, a YouTube user by the name of Junk VHS Tapes Pal uploaded an entire recording of a Planet Plant Bach blog from December of 2007, which unfortunately has the Q rebrand, making it the closest we have to the blog finally getting resurfaced. And plus, there's the CBBC wiki, which for some reason has pages about the airings of both Planet Plant Bach and Planet Plant and the shows that they've aired. I don't know if anyone on this wiki knows what these channels are. And there you go. That was me talking about the history of Welsh dubs and how they are made to help people from Wales learn the Welsh language. Plus, I've rewritten some things just so that I couldn't be too in-depth about, except for the last part, cause I've copy and pasted it and then I'm lazy. And if you couldn't tell, this is the last video of the series as I don't know what else to do. And with this computer I'm using that is 9 years old at this point, I feel like I should be having a new laptop just so I could have a new editing program to improve my editing skills. But anyways, I'm still going to make videos, don't get me wrong, but that won't stop me from making more content. But until then, this is me signing out. Cheerio!
Oh,